So caring at Christmas, the first thing we would say to you is have realistic expectations. And that's a very important thing. And we're inclined not to do that. And I was laughing today as I was looking at this, and I was thinking, as realistic expectations, I should take my own advice. I have turned into my mother. And I was just thinking of my mother, the things that she used to do before Christmas, mad things. I came home from Christmas shopping once and found her on the floor because she had got up on a rickety ladder to paint the ceiling before the visitors came. She was 78 years old. Now, she had a lump on her head the size of an egg and a broken heel. So she spent Christmas sitting down with a walking frame. And she was so mad at herself. Who looks at the ceiling? If you think about it, but she thought, oh, I can't have them coming in and seeing that kitchen ceiling like that. So have realistic expectations. Don't overdo it. Try to set achievable goals. And particularly if somebody has a diagnosis of cognitive impairment or short-term memory loss, they may have a skill set that we have to work with. It might be more difficult for them to get involved in very complicated arrangements. So let's try and keep it simple. Talk to the person and ask them how they would like to be involved. That's a very good thing to do. And there's lots of things that we can get involved with. The decorations, again, without putting too big a burden on the person. There's things like setting the table. I have a few examples of things we can do for later. Do they want, what do they want to do? How do they want to be involved in the Christmas? Think about their past experiences of Christmas. And that's actually a lovely thing to do, to go back over things that we did when we were younger. And a person who has short-term memory loss often has extremely good long-term memory. So they can remember things that they did when they were children. And, Christmas time is a great time for reminiscing. Things like, I always remember Mammy coming in with the Sidona. I don't know if any of you remember the big glass bottles of Sidona with the rubber stoppers on them. They were gigantic. When that came in and was put into the larder, you knew it was for Christmas, and it was so exciting. Making the Christmas cake, making the Christmas pudding. Everybody got involved in that. I had my job. I was the youngest. I had my job. My job was blanching the almonds. Now, for young people, they say, what on earth is blanching the almonds? You used to get the almonds ready in the pack. So you'd have to put them into a little teacup of boiling water and let it cool. And then you'd have to rub the skins off them. And that was my job because I was quite young. So that was my job. In later years, of course, you got more important jobs. You used to have to wash the sultanas and the raisins and stuff. Actually, it didn't come ready washed. So there were a whole load of things like that you would have. There was a huge evening's work making and mixing the Christmas cake or mixing the pudding. And everybody always had a stir of the pudding. So I have lovely memories of preparing for Christmas. Untangling the Christmas lights was always a big one. So, if you go back into those kind of Christmas experiences, it can be lovely to reminisce and to remember happy times. Now, if they didn't have happy Christmases or hated Christmas, obviously that won't work. So you have to, again, it's all about the person and tailoring it to the person's experience. Talk to family and friends and plan ahead. Planning ahead is the secret to having an easy day. If you plan ahead, if you don't plan ahead, you'll find that, like, although we planned ahead today, myself and Grace, we still had technical difficulties. So, the best laid plans, you have to be flexible about your plans, but planning when the person arrives, if they're visiting you, which room are you going to go to? Don't say, well, do you want to go in the front room? You go back. Have that planned. Bring the person in, sit them down. Is it going to be a cup of tea? Is it going to be a sherry? What's going to happen? Have it planned, have it ready. So that and then that takes the stress out of it. So planning ahead, planning the dinner, having the dinner so that it's not, well, you always plan your Christmas dinner anyway, but having your plan set in place. in advance. Planning is everything. And who's going to do what? Everybody, if everybody took a job, it would be very helpful to the person who's perhaps catering for the meal. So decorating the tree, that can be a lovely activity. Now, it can be very enjoyable. You can have some Christmas music on in the background, like we do at home. We always put on Christmas songs, and we decorate the tree, and it's a real family thing. Be careful of the flashing lights. Now, I don't like flashing lights from my own point of view because they give me a headache, actually. I find that they give me a headache. But also they can be quite, they can be a bit overwhelming for a person maybe with dementia, having something, flashing in the corner of the room. So if that is something that disturbs the person, there's ways of turning off the flash. And remember to have fun, because that's what it's all about. If you don't like the way somebody put the decorations on the tree, maybe change them later, but don't make a big deal of it. It should be fun. It should be something that you enjoy. It shouldn't be stressful. So some activities that might be suitable at Christmas is baking and crafts can be fun. I have an example of an easy way of doing a little baking, a suggestion for that in the practical. You can buy cookie mix, or you can even sometimes, I remember in Super Queen, you used to be able to buy cookie dough, and it was and you could roll it out, just roll it out, and then get cookie cutters and things like that. If the person isn't up to doing the whole baking from scratch thing, there are cheaty ways of doing that. But at the same time, you feel like you've made something. And different things like that. So I have a few suggestions on that in the practical demonstration. Peeling and washing the vegetables. A lot of people are well able to do that. They mightn't be able to take on the whole big Christmas dinner thing, but they could be able to do some of the preparation. And that can be very much a communal thing and a fun thing to do as well. And feeling useful, as I said, I have done a presentation before on activities. Feeling useful is very important to people's self-esteem. One of the examples I would give is I went to visit a house, and there was a couple, and they had retired to Ireland, but their family were all in England. And the lady had dementia, and the husband was very concerned about Christmas because he didn't want to do the whole airport thing at Christmas. He just dreaded the stress of traveling at Christmas. It was very stressful the last time they had gone through the airport, and he didn't fancy the Christmas rush. So he wanted to stay at home, but he was worried about doing a whole turkey. So actually my session with him was talking him through shopping for a little Christmas stuffed roast that would do 2 people, which you can buy in Dunnes in a foil tray. You don't even have to then have a baking tray. And I talked him through buying that and getting it early and freezing it and then having it so that you had it on the time. And the same with the ham. You can buy little gammons in their own roasting tray. So actually, it was seen as there were only the 2 of them. And that worked very well. And I rang him up after Christmas to see how he got on, because I was thinking of him. And he said it was really worked very well. They didn't have the stress of traveling. Their family didn't have to come home for Christmas Day, which would have been very difficult for them to do because they had family in England. And it all worked out extremely well. And he was really, really happy with the advice again. I talked him through cooking the dinner. And but the vegetables were no problem. His wife could do the vegetables. It was just the whole idea of doing a whole big turkey. Now this year, they were talking, and it was on the news, about people looking for smaller turkeys because they're not going to have the big crowd. They're not going to be let have the big crowd in, and they're going to be smaller. But thinking about that, people get very tied up in the whole cooking thing. You can get smaller breasts of turkey, crowns of turkey. If you don't, you could get pork, for goodness sake. It doesn't have to be the same as every other year. You don't have to get a gigantic bird and stuff it and put it and have it for 15 people. We're not going to be able to do that this year. So we may have to tailor the catering around that. But it is possible to have a beautiful Christmas dinner and not have a 15-pound or 20-pound turkey. I don't know, can't imagine the size of these birds. It's possible to get smaller roasts and to still do a beautiful meal. So, thinking ahead, that's part of the planning, part of getting the whole meal ready. but try not to stress about it, and including the person in the preparation. Helping to set the table is a great way of helping out, and folding the napkins. I have a few suggestions of easy to do napkins that can look very pretty on the table. Putting out crackers, great fun, putting the crackers out on the table. Simple things like that, depending on the person's age and their abilities and their skills. So when choosing the activity, think about what skills the person has and what they can do. If they can do, don't give them a job they can't do, and because it can cause them to be stressed out. Family. Remember, family and friends often have spare time at Christmas, so talk to them about spending time with you and your loved one. So this is a good thing. If you're at home, say for example, you have a person who might be quite old and quite frail, and one person caring for them at home. Talk to other family members about when they can visit. Can they take the person out for a walk? As I say, we can go down, get your takeaway coffee and maybe have it outside, not having, big crowds outside having coffee. Obviously, we're not allowed to do that with large numbers, super spreaders and all that sort of thing. So spending time with the person and having that. I had another couple who, like that, the crowd was just, having a big crowd in at Christmas was just too much for the person who had the diagnosis. So the spouse said, look, let's take days. You come the Sunday before Christmas, you come on Christmas Day, you come during the week. And she spread out the visits of the family, and it worked very, very well. So, think about that. Are there times when the person could come and maybe, bring a bit of Christmas cheer with them, have a lovely visit, maybe go, on a walk, as I say, or do something nice with the person and yourself to bring, a little bit of company to the house. Now, we do not know at this stage what we're going to be allowed to have. We don't know how many visitors we're going to be allowed to have. Here's hoping that we're allowed to have, see some of our loved ones over the Christmas. But try and plan ahead and talk to other family members about what they can do to help. Religion. Christmas is actually a religious festival. And I know there are a lot of people who don't follow any religion. They're not particularly religious. But the person that you are looking after, the person who has dementia, maybe have very strong religious attitudes and beliefs. So it would be nice if you can go to a religious service. Again, we don't know if they're going to be open, if the churches will be open. So if there are no religious service that you can go to safely, perhaps take time to visit the crib. A lot of the churches will be open and they will have a crib, or they will have some, the church that you can go in and have maybe a prayer or whatever. But it would be very nice if you could have some sort of a religious experience for the person if they have religious beliefs. A lot of services will be online, and there are websites, and perhaps if your loved one is someone who can't really do the whole tech thing and find that whole social media thing difficult, perhaps a family member could find the church service that would suit them. It might be from a local church. There might be music, listening to carols. Now, we're not going to have carol services this year. I just don't see it happening. Every year, you have the various churches and groups, and even in the shopping centres, you'll have people collecting for charity and singing. We're not going to have that this year. We can't have it because of social distancing. But there are going to be a number of concerts and carol services online. And you can always get a carol book. I have a couple of examples there, and maybe sing them yourselves. You don't have to be Pavarotti. And enjoy, just have the music is so useful to a person, and it can really lighten the mood, and people can enjoy it very much. Again, this is going to depend on COVID. If the house is very busy with lots of visitors, have somebody beside the person to help them with names. If you're having short-term memory loss and a whole load of people are coming into the house and you can't think of their name, have somebody prompt you. It's a good tip for any time. If somebody comes, if you meet somebody and you're with somebody who has short-term memory loss and they're having difficulty with names, why not just prompt them? Oh, look, here's Mary. Oh, sure, look, there's Grace. Isn't that Grace? Grace came to see us. That kind of thing. Don't make it so obvious that you're prompting someone, but give them a hint. Give them a hint. Don't leave them hanging there, because that can be very difficult for a person. They can feel very anxious if they can't suddenly, oh my God, I should know this person, I can't think of their name. And that can cause anxiety. We don't want that. So just help people out. Be sensitive to it. Have a rota for this. Well, again, this would be if you were having a crowd in to the house, which we may not be able to have this year because of COVID-19. But if you are having people in, just be sensitive to that. And make sure there's a quiet place for the person with dementia to go if the house is too noisy. Because that can be very disturbing. If you've got a lot of clatter and noise and fuss, just have a quiet place that they can go and just take a breath. Take a breath away from all the clatter and the noise and the fuss, because that can be quite confusing. It can be very confusing for an older person who's having hearing difficulties, because if you're wearing a hearing aid, that can really, a lot of people talking at once can be very difficult for somebody like that. So be sensitive to that. On Christmas Day, when you're about to sit down to your meal, you're going to be flat out getting this food ready and trying to get it to the table hot. But build in a reminder to go to the loo about 10 minutes before you sit down. Don't forget. Because if you have a thing, I always say this too, if you're going to a restaurant or anywhere else, locate the bathroom first and go to the loo before the meal arrives. Because the worst thing that can happen is you sit down to the meal and the person needs to go to the loo, you have to go with them, you come back, the food is cold and the dinner is ruined. So, and that can cause stress after all the work. So just so that the person is comfortable and all of that, they may forget to use the loo because they're having short-term memory problems. So just remind them to use the loo and get that all out of the way before you start. And build that into your timetable. I have this on the bottom one, but put a sign on the toilet door and have a clear pathway so that they can find the loo. If you've invited someone over to your home and they have dementia, make sure that there's a clear pathway to the loo and they know where it is and there's a sign on the door. Because if they're in a strange place, they mightn't know where the loo is. And also leave the door open when it's unoccupied so that they can see that there's nobody in there. Could stand outside waiting for whoever's in there to come out and, be too late. So that we don't want that. So a sign and a clear pathway to the door, to the loo, make life easy. That's for general, anytime. A plan where they are going to sit in advance at the table. So don't walk up to a big table and say, where do you want to sit? You can only confuse the person. Have their place set. This is your place. Here you go. This is for you. And if we go back to when I was doing the food and dementia and eating and dementia, remember my suggestions about the table setting. Table setting should be simple, not overcomplicated. Christmas time, we take out all the best stuff. We have an array of knives and forks. We have all the best china. We have all the best waterford. Whatever we have, it's all the good stuff. Lovely, it looks lovely, but keep the person's place setting simple. Don't confuse them. Have their place setting simple. Don't, have the cutlery for the starter. Take it away when they're finished. Put the cutlery down for the main course. Have the cutlery for the main course. And then have the cutlery for the, take that away and have the cutlery for the dessert. And save that confusion. Keep the table, the place setting for their place, nice but simple. And another point is the red plates. Red delf or red china. This can be very helpful. It harks back to the last talk I gave on food. And I've had some feedback on that. I gave that talk at our own cafe, the Loud Monaghan Virtual Cafe. And somebody has come back and said, actually, their loved one wasn't eating very well. They had a poor appetite. And so they tried the red plate and it has actually worked and they're eating better. So, that's a good tip. And anyway, it's Christmas time, red plates are lovely. So if you can get a red plate, if you can get red delf, and just have their plate would be lovely, just to have that. Don't let me. Yeah, so we finished with that. If they need their food cut up, do cut up their food. Ask, would you like? Don't just go in, launch in, cut up the person's food. If you know that their food needs to be cut up, help them with that. Cut up the food so that they don't choke. That they don't take a big piece of turkey or a big piece of ham and try and eat it all in one go because they've forgotten. So don't overload the plates and avoid too much alcohol. Now, the too much alcohol at Christmas. We're a great nation for having, what was it, going on the lash? Was that what the Taoiseach said recently? There can't be, you're not to go on the lash for Christmas. So we'll have to take the Taoiseach's word for that. We do. People overindulge at Christmas. They eat far too much. They eat far too much goodies. They eat far too much chocolate and pudding and drink. If a person is on medication where they cannot have alcohol, that must be taken into consideration. They cannot have alcohol. So maybe make the sacrifice and everybody have the Sidona or the Schlur or the orange juice or whatever instead for Christmas Day. If they can have a glass of wine, fine, but try not to, have sort of the aperitif when they arrive in, and then a drink and a couple of glasses of wine at the table, and then a brandy to finish. That's overdoing it. That's binge. So we must be everything in moderation. If they're not allowed any alcohol at all, no alcohol. If they're allowed a little, then just keep an eye on it, because we don't want somebody falling over and breaking a hip. We have to be careful and remember to take whatever medication they're on into consideration. Overloading plates can be too much for people who have a small appetite. So I like harking back to the eating with dementia. A big plate with the small, food on it the food looks smaller. If somebody is overeating, then you put the same amount of food on a smaller plate, and it looks like there's more food on it, and it gives the illusion that you're eating more than you are. This year we're asked not to serve buffet style meals. And that's so that we're not sharing cutlery, metal cutlery, that somebody coming in handling the serving spoons or the, whatever it is, and then somebody else coming in, everybody, because, if you do have COVID, it can stay on surfaces and metal surfaces. So as much as they look great and they're great fun, and we often have them on St. Stephen's Day or whatever, the buffets are out. The food will have to be plated for each individual person. So the food will have to be plated up. Now that adds maybe to the workload of the person who's serving it. What you might have to do is ask for help in the kitchen, but limit the number of people you have in the preparation area. Don't have a crowd in the kitchen round all helping. That's as bad as having the buffet. You have to use your noodle. Maybe have a helper who you put the food on the plate and they carry it in and give it to the person. You know what I mean? Help serve it, take in 2 plates at a time or take a tray in. We're going to have to plate the food this year. We won't be able to have the nice serving dishes out with all the fancy cutlery. We're not going to be able to have that this year. We're going to have to plate the food and put it on. Now that plate looks overloaded to me. If someone put that down in front of me, I'd go, oh my God, I'd never be able to eat all that. Especially after you've had your starter, because we all do mad things. And, say for example, you had soup as a starter because the person liked soup. Can you imagine trying to eat that after a big bowl of soup? Or anything, even if it was melon balls. There's too much on that plate. It looks lovely, but there's far too much on it. Take time to rest for both you and your loved one. Rest is as important as activity. And congratulate yourself for coping and for being there for someone who needs you. That's very important for family carers as well. Have a Merry Christmas.